How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander, also known as Jerementor on YouTube, and welcome to my new platformer mini-series. I'm really excited about this mini-series because what I've done is I've pooled together all the resources from the forums and just generally the internet on how to make a compelling and classic platformer game with Construct 2. Now, the reason why I did this is because there's no reason why your first game can't look something like this. Whether you're brand new to the software or you've used it before, there's no reason why you couldn't have gameplay features and why we couldn't focus on that versus just the engine and how to actually make an overall game that feels good and that looks nice as well. So what we're going to be doing, and I'm just going to run you down out of order here, is we're going to be making a menu system like you see here, where we're going to actually map it to local storage to pick our input. So if we go to controls here, you can see that we have three types of controls. We have WASD, we have the arrow keys, and we have the gamepad. And when you select one of those, it's going to map it to local storage. And that way, when you restart the game, it'll actually bring back what you had already selected. So if I pick the gamepad, now every time I restart the game, it'll always default to the gamepad until I change it again. I'll put it to WASD for now. Then we have an options menu where we have our globally stored music. And what that means is we have a persisting object that'll control the music. So when we go from layout to layout, you can actually mute the music. So if I mute the music here, which I have done because there is no music playing, and we go to our game, you can hear that the music will not be playing until I turn it on. So it's actually something that I haven't seen in a lot of Construct 2 games, and it's something that I really wanted to have in here. So it's a very simple feature to add. And when I unmute it, you can hear the music. And when I mute it again and we start the game, you will not be able to. Same thing goes for the SFX. If I mute it, you won't be able to hear that in the game at all. Then we have our full screen option right there, which is always nice because now you can actually see the game in all its glory. So other things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding enemy AI, moving platforms, spikes. We're going to be able to collect coins. We're going to have a timer on the HUD that'll actually influence us to play faster. We want to see how fast we can beat the level. And in this case, the boss, we're going to have an intense boss battle. We're going to change the music for it, and we're just going to have different AI for it. So it's going to be really fun. We have some cool signs that'll actually scroll text, and all of this is going to be done without any plugins whatsoever. So let me hit start game. And now you can see that we have a nice fade out effect, fade in effect, and that's another thing that you can find online. But it's really just the point of this is to pool everything together just to show you the powers of Construct 2 and just to show you that you can make a game like this even if it's your first game. So here's what we have. So we have our WASD working. We have variable jump height. So if I hit this only a little bit, or if I hold it down, we can actually do that. Later on, we will have wall jump and wall slide when you collect the power up. And then if I go over to this sign here, you can see that we have scrolling text. And if I hit X, we'll go to the next one and the next one and the next one until it's finished. And we have a cool zoom feature that does that as well. Now, all of this is just basic. This is just the engine. You can spend time to actually put your own twist on it. You know, one of the things that we were talking about is you could have a button appear when you go over the sign. So instead of just having it do this, you can have a button pop up and then you hit X and then it'll do that. All of these things are subjective. They're what you want to have in your game. So let's keep going here. You can see that we have some spikes shaking and falling before they actually fall. We have a cool sine wave effect on the coins, which is really fun to add. And then we have our moving platforms just like you would see in any other game. Now we have our enemies here, and when I jump on their heads, they die. But if I take damage from them, I'll lose a health, and when I lose health and then I jump on their heads, I should be able to get my health back. You couldn't see it in that split second, but it will drop health pickup, and you can pick that back up. So let's go down, let's keep going further. We have more signs, which is nice, and we can go ride this platform. Avoid some spikes. Oh, I took some damage there. And we can go here. And we're going to talk about how when it comes to programming those spikes, how we can make them shake, if you can see in the bottom over here. And in addition to that, just how it influences your gameplay depending on when they fall. You can have them fall right before the player actually is in their line of sight, or you could have it wait until after, or you could have it at a random interval. So there's a lot of things that you're going to be able to do and extrapolate from what we actually make to putting your own twist on it. So here we have another enemy. I took damage from it because I didn't time my jump correctly. There we go. So there's my little drop. and I can pick that back up, and we have another sign, and I can grab my platform, or my power up. So when I grab my power up, I have this really neat dash effect that fades in and fades out. I call it a dash effect because that's usually what you see, and this only happens when we fall or when we jump. It'll kind of create this trail behind you. And now what we can do is we can actually jump higher, and in addition to that, we can actually wall jump, which is really nice. If we grab onto a wall, if we grab onto a wall and we hold down S for the keys or X for the gamepad, we can actually slide down the wall, which is nice. And we have different sound effects for that and for the wall jump when we jump off of a wall. So all of those things are relatively simple to add, but it's nice and it adds to the overall feel of your classic platform. So let's let these guys drop. There we go. And we have our final sign here. Did you hear that? My sign senses are tingling. Careful traveler, a boss approaches. So we're going to have a final boss fight just to top everything off, which will look really nice. And that platform got a little stuck there. But we have so many things going on that I really hope that all of these things, and if you do encounter any problems, they're problems that you can fix. So let me let the boss kind of come out, and let me unmute the music here with our pause menu, which we also have. And it also says the controller. And now you can hear the awesome, intense boss music, and now we can engage in this awesome, intense boss fight where I can pick up health. And let's see if I can beat him real fast or if I die. It's okay if I die because I want to show you the next menu here. I'm going to let myself die. So when I die, I can't mute the music on this layout, but I get taken to this frame that tells me how many coins I collected, how long it took me to complete the level, if I died or if I won, and then there's just the credits. And then when I restart here, let me mute the music again so you can hear me. My keyboard controls should be mapped there, so now I can actually go back and play again with WASD, or I can hit P to pause, and I can go back to the menu, and I can change it to the gamepad. Now if I go to the gamepad, I can pick up my game controller, and now I'm moving with my game controller, which is really nice. And same thing applies, everything works. So this is the game that we're going to be making. I really do hope that you are excited to make this game with me because it's a lot of work and we have a lot of stuff to do, but I think I have a way to make it a lot easier for you to jumpstart your next platformer game. So let's get started. Let me close out of this and let's get started. All right, so what we want to do is we want to make a new project by going File, New Retro Style Project. And once we do that, we're pretty much all set up to have our pixel game. So let me delete these objects by selecting and deleting. And before you ask, I know I get this question all the time. I have a theme on my Construct 2, which is the Visual Studio theme. Go to the View tab up here, Style, Visual Studio Styles, and Visual Studio 2012 Blue. Then to make my event sheet dark, what I do is I go to Preferences. And if you don't have that as a hotkey, you can go File, Preferences. And you can go to your colors here and you can choose the theme dark gray, and then you just hit load, select the theme, and then you hit OK. So now that we have that covered, let's go over our layout properties here. So this is going to be our game layout here, and I'm going to try to keep everything under one house for the event sheet until we absolutely have to split it up. This project is probably going to go over the free version limit relatively quickly. I'm going to try my best to keep it as intact with the free version as possible, but some things we just absolutely need, and one of the things is we need a lot of layers. So I think we're going to have around 12 layers by the time we're finished with this, and we're going to have about 300 something events. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's worth it because you'll see how much easier it is to prototype your game and get your game out there. So what we're going to do is, before we get into any naming structures, we're just going to click on our layout here. That way, oops, not double click. That way we actually have in our properties window, which if you don't have that open, you can just open it by clicking on the View tab and making sure your properties window is open. And we're going to go to our project properties. Now the first thing I want to do here is fill out the about. So let me call this, just like we did before, we're going to call this Floofs Adventure. This will be version 1.0 is fine. Description, simple game, platformer, whatever you want to call it. My reverse domain name is going to be com.jerementor, because that's my website, .main. This would be, you would have to have an ID if you were making an app, but this is pretty much targeted for desktop and HTML5. So I hope you know that going in. You could definitely take some of these concepts, or pretty much all of the gameplay concepts, and bring them to your mobile game. It's just with the amount of objects and the amount of layers that we're going to have, it probably wouldn't run as well. I haven't really tested it, but it's still going to be useful to you no matter what kind of developer you are. Author of this game is me, and I'll leave the other stuff free to go for you guys to fill out for your own project. Now, we're going to leave everything else the same. We're going to turn pixel rounding off because we don't want our objects to snap at an integer. We want them to snap at every float value. Then I think we're pretty much good to go. We are going to clear the background when we add in our background image, but let's actually go back to our layout size here. And on our layout size for this layout, we actually want to have unbounded scrolling to yes. And what that means is when we add the scroll to behavior to an object, it's going to scroll past this edge here. So instead of it stopping like right there, it's going to stop like right here or wherever we are when we hit this edge. So we're going to make sure that we limit the space here, but we want to have the unbounded scrolling for our actual level. For the menu and stuff like that, I turn it off. So for our layout size, we're going to make it 16 by 9. So we're going to do 2560, which is going to be very big, by 720. No, let's think. What are we doing? 2560 by 1440. I was getting confused there for a second. And that's going to be a larger 16 by 9 area to work with. And then the other thing I want to change is the margins. And this is how far I can scroll out and pan in a little bit. So I'm going to put this up to 2000. Oops, that's 200. Then the final thing here is going to be our dotted lines here, our window size. Now I want our window size to also be 16 by 9, as that is the most common aspect ratio that you would use to develop with to scale. So if you did want to bring this to mobile, although I again have not tested it on mobile, you could. What we're going to do is we're going to change the width to 640 and we're going to change the height to 360. And all this stuff you can find on, Wikipedia, how to do 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And you can look at all the different aspect ratios that you would want. But this is how we're going to set up our level 2560 by 1440. And we can save this project and we can actually begin. Let me actually hit save and let me save this. So one of the things here is going to be our assets folder, which I'm about to get into. So let me save this project in our assets folder and let me call this, actually, you know what? I'll make a new folder in this assets folder for you guys. We're going to call this cap X. Even though this will be our project, we're going to call it cap X. And we're just going to call this Floofs Adventure. You can call it whatever you like. I'm just going to call it what I've been calling it. And there we go. So now we have it saved. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at this asset folder. So I have this assets folder opened, and you should be able to download every single folder here except for the purchase folder, but I'm going to go over this right now. So the first thing is I have our CapEx saved in here, so there we go. But I also have all of the art that is needed. I have it broken down into the enemy, so our anti-floof, and then I have our actual floof, which has different animations from the enemy. I didn't make the enemy jump or fall, but we could always do that if we wanted to. It's just it's a darker color scheme, so you could technically edit that yourself. But we have a fall, an idle for our character. We have jump, walk, and wall slide images. So then same thing for our enemy. We have our idle and our walk, and I think we're only using our walk. We're not even using the idle, but by giving you these extra assets, maybe you could put that in there on your own. Then we have stuff for the HUD. We have our health bar, and we have our boss health, which is nice. We don't use the A button for anything, but I thought since we had it made, we might as well just put it in there. So if you want to use the A button, you can. Use the X button just to illustrate that you have to press X for this part, and then we have our text box. And all of these things are going to go on their own layer, and they're all going to have their parallax down to 0 so we can actually keep them static inside the window. Then we have all of our level stuff. We have our arrows. We have top and bottom arrows, which technically we could have cloned it and flipped the image, but having them as separate sprites works as well. We have our boss door, which we're going to probably put into one sprite so we can just have it appear and shake violently, which makes for a nicer impact. Then we have our coin. We have our dash, which is really our trail effect, which is nice. We have our explosion. So I didn't show the explosion because in the demo that I was doing, I actually chose to die instead of chose to win. When we defeat the boss, he explodes, which is really cool, and we have all these particles go crazy, so that's fun as well. Then we have our health, which we pick up, and just in case you ever wanted to program something else where you don't have a health pickup, or if you pick up an empty health by accident, maybe that's another thing that you could put in there, so I threw that in there as well. Then we have our spike and our power-up feather orb. Let's keep going. We have our menu stuff, our menu buttons, and I think these are just a little bit backwards on the naming convention. This is going to be our button neutral position, and this is going to be our hover. Then we have our UI panel as well. Then we have our sign. I'm skipping over the purchase for right now. Then we have our sign, and this is just our sign. I can make this into extra large icons or something like that. We have our sign image right there, which is our PNG, and then we have our XML files, which we read the sign data off. So we'll be going over that as well. And then finally, we have our tile maps, and this is what we're going to be starting with. We're going to be setting up our level. So we have our background and we have our tile map. And to make things easier, or as easy as possible for you, I've given you the exact tile maps that I've used. They're saved as TMX files, so you can open them in Tiled, which is a free tile mapping program, but you don't even need to because we're going to be just importing these and you'll have the exact same level that I used. Cool, so now let's go over the purchase folder. This is where I purchased the music and the sprite fonts. So I will not be giving these to you when you download the assets folder. You would have to purchase them yourself, but in total, it costs $6. So hopefully you can invest $6 if you want the exact same music and sprite fonts that I used, but otherwise it's optional. You don't have to. You can make your own music, you can find your own music, you can make your own sprite font, you could use the default sprite font. So there's things that you can do, but this is what I've used for the music. I will be giving you all the sound effects that I use, and I haven't put it in here yet, but I will be doing that. So you will have the sound effects, but you will not have the music and the sprite font because you'll have to purchase that. And we're actually going to go over how to purchase things on the Skira store and how to make it very simple, and hopefully you can afford that. So that's what we're going to do. What we're going to start with is our tile maps. So let's do that first. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to Construct 2 and we're going to import our tile map by double clicking. And we're going to make a new tile map. So we're going to go to our tile mapped object and we're going to click. And now when I hit open here, let me just navigate to my to the assets folder. Now that I'm there, I'm going to go to the tile map and I'm going to actually grab this tile map PNG. So this is the tile map that the TMX file will read data off of. So I'm going to exit out of that, and then by default, it's going to make it as large as the layout can. And we can rename this to TM level and hit OK. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to do a few things because we're going to have the background. But for right this second, let's just import the tile map object. So let's go to our view tab up here and let's open up our tile map bar, which will open up right here. I tend to close out of it even though I have it docked, but oops, now I don't have it docked. There we go. Let me put this back right there or there. All right, no worries. I'll open that back up in a second. But what we have here is our tile map bar, and we could actually just paint on our tile map like so, which is fine. And you can totally design the level like this if you choose to. There's other tools here where you can actually just click and drag, and you can actually just right click and erase, or you can grab the eraser. One of the things that we will be using is the tile map collision tool. So I want to show you this really quickly, and we're going to go over this when we actually have an issue like this. If I were to paint a tile on, and this is pretty much where these issues might occur, like this, which is a corner piece, if I double click on this, you can see my tile map collision here. And this tile map collision is almost perfect, except what I'm going to end up wanting is more of a slant. So I'm going to want to move these numbers. I'm going to right click and add a point. I'm going to want to make this as close to 8 as I can. And that way it's going to match up with our other tiles. We're going to go into that, but that's something that we are going to be using with the tile map. And now when you actually turn on collisions here, or let me see, there should be a way that you can view these collisions later on. We'll have to look at that. But really what we needed right now was just to import this tile map object with this tile map. Now these tiles are 32 by 32, so you don't have to change anything here, which is really nice because sometimes you can mess around with tiles from the internet and they don't line up. So what we want to do is we want to open and import our TMX object. So let me again navigate to our assets folder here, and let me bring that back. Let's go to our tile maps and let's import our level tile map. Okay, so when I import the tile map, I did not know that. It's actually going to already take the same sprite sheet, so we can just hit replace image and it'll use the same thing. And let's see here. Did that actually do that properly? It did. It just looks a little funny when it's zoomed out. But now we should have our tile map object ready to go. So that's our tile map object. Let's hit save. And the one thing I didn't talk about yet was the exporting. So hopefully you have decided to purchase Construct 2 Personal Edition because it is just a better value, in my opinion, than using the free version if you're serious about making fun games, retro style games, anything like that. It just has more to offer. So if you go to the project properties here, now I don't remember off the top of my head if you can or cannot use NWJS, but I will be using NWJS to preview the game because it's easier for me rather than switching back and forth between Chrome. So you can use whatever default browser you have chosen to preview your game. Whatever works for you, that is perfectly fine. I'm going to be targeting this game towards NWJS and desktop, but it should also run on Chrome or any browser flawlessly, but that's what I'm going to be previewing with. So when I hit save, and now when I hit play, you can see everything load up. The layout is loaded up at our window size. It's zoomed into our window size, and this is how big our layout size is. And our tile map looks fine. It may have looked a little funny on the recording there. I'm not sure if it did, like when you zoom out here, but it looks perfectly fine up close, and that's all we really care about. Now, the first thing I want to do here is I want to select this tile map, and I want to take the behaviors and I want to add a solid behavior to this, and this is going to act as our collision. So now all those collision polygons that I just showed you, that's what's going to take place. So for pretty much all of these, they're all going to be the square. They're going to be the square. They're going to be the box collider collision. That's what I was trying to say. There we go. So if I double click on this, you can see that this is going to be a bounding box collision versus a custom one. But now we have the option to do that. I see here that it kind of added in, oh no, it didn't. It just added in that one little platform thing. I did not know that that was part of my tile sheet, but if we're going to replace that with our own platforms, they're separate sprites. But if you can leave that in, that's fine. All right, let's move on to the background. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a new layer. And I can already tell that this might actually go above the 4-layer limit for the free version quickly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this new layer our tile map. And I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to move to layer tile map. And then I'm going to lock it. Then I'm going to go onto layer 0 and I'm going to double click and I'm going to add a new sprite. And that way I can actually add this sprite. If I go here, I'm going to open in our background. It's going to say that this is very large. And I'm going to exit out of that. And now I actually have our background. So let me go to the View tab. Let me show the grid and let me hit Snap to Grid. And by snapping to the grid, I should be able to snap very closely to the tiles, if not perfectly. If it doesn't work, I can reset the origin point. So I can go into our sprite by double clicking it, go to our origin point, quick assign it to the top left and hit exit. Now, if you haven't been able to go over that process more than once, if you've never done this before, then I will be going over that process a whole lot. So if I did that kind of quickly, you should be able to get that again. So now we have our background in, and this is actually pretty good because now it looks exactly like the game you just saw, and you're already, 10 steps ahead of where I started when I had to design the whole level. Level design is something we'll touch upon because it's very important. And what I did was I actually spent time with my notebook and I drew out the level that I wanted to have. And I knew that I wanted to start here, and I knew that I wanted this nook over here to have some coins and extra enemies, and I wanted a huge area for the boss. So level design is something that I'm going to touch upon with you guys because I really think that you should plan your levels ahead of time if you're going to do it this way versus something that's generated. So it's kind of important that you make it as fun as possible. All right, so now that we have our background, let's rename this to be our background layer. And now that we actually have our background layer, let's go over to our properties here. And let's actually change the transparency to yes, because otherwise, if I turn this to no and I move this background over, you can see that it's going to draw in the background for me. But if I turn this to yes, it gets rid of it. So there we go. And now I actually have my object background. So I'm going to prefix a lot of my objects with obj. It's kind of what I'm used to. I'm going to call this object background. And let's actually open up our objects bar that I closed out of, and we can close out of our tile map bar here. And now you can see that we're starting to develop some objects. So we can actually delete our tiled background from before. And my computer makes a very loud noise. I apologize for that. But we can delete our tile background. We can keep our text object because we might use that in the future here. But we have all of our default objects from the retro style project. It's already taken the liberty of importing our audio, browser, gamepad, keyboard, mouse, touch, and web storage. So what I'm going to do, and this is, I know for a fact that this is only for the personal version here, is I'm going to go to the object types. I'm going to insert a subfolder. I'm going to call these our plugins because these are our default plugins that Construct 2 comes with. So I'm going to put our audio plugin in there, our browser, our gamepad, our keyboard, our mouse, our touch, and our web storage. Now I'm actually going to add some new objects or some new plugins as well. So let's double click and let's add in the local storage plugin. Let's double click and add in the XML plugin. Let's double click and let's type in the Ajax plugin. And the XML and the Ajax are just for reading off the signs. It won't be as complicated as it might sound if you've never done that before. And then finally, let's grab our function and let's actually grab our NWJS as well. If you're using NWJS, then it's good to have this there. I'm not sure if we're actually going to use it for much other than a few debugging things that I'm going to show you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually look, let's think, what do we want to do next? Now that we have our plugins, let's actually put these back into our plugins folder here. And let's just drag all of those there. And we can start to actually separate our object types a little bit more. So we can look here. Now we have our plugins folder, our object background, text, and our tilemap levels. So these are the three objects that we have, and then we have all of our plugins. So if you wanted to organize a little bit more, which I think I'm going to do, we're going to add a subfolder. And I added it, but then it kind of clicked over there. So I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to rename this subfolder. I'm going to call this level. And I'm just going to drag object background in there and the tile map in there. And we can, we can clean it up as we keep going. But right now I just want to import all the assets and get them going. Okay, so let's add a new layer. And let's call this layer our entities layer. And for right now, we're going to put them all onto this layer. Usually you can actually put them onto a different layout altogether so they don't conflict. But I think since we have our margins, we should be able to put them over here and they will be just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually, first thing is let's go to our project properties. Like I said before, we were going to actually clear the background. Now that we don't have any colors, now that we have now that we are all transparent, we can actually just hit yes. Pause on unfocus, you can always turn on if you're using Chrome and you accidentally click out of the browser and you want the game to pause, you can turn that on as well. But for right now, we can leave that to no. So let's think about what we want to do next. Let's actually go for the player first. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom all the way in so you can see what's going on. And I'm going to actually add him over here. So let's double click and add a new sprite. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend a lot of time in the image editor here. So what you might want to do is organize your image editor to your liking. I have it like this, and for the most part, it stays like this. Every time I close out and open it back up, it'll actually stay the way that I had it saved. By default, the animation frames are down here, but I find it easier to see it up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on our animation frames window, anywhere will do. We're going to import from files because these are not sprite sheets, and we're going to navigate to Floof, which is our character. And we're going to grab our walk cycle. Actually, you know what? Let's grab our idle first. And let's just hold down shift to get both of them. And let's hit open. So once we're done with that, I can delete frame 0 because it imports after that. And let's zoom in. And we can see here that we have our idle animation just like that. Let's double check our size here just in case our sizes get off. They should all be 18 by 18. But what we want to do here is we want to just make sure that our bounding box is set, and this is our collision that our player will actually collide with the tile map with. So let's make sure that this is set to bounding box, and to apply it to every animation, we're just going to hit apply to all. Of course, it's going to bring up the lovely noise, and then I'm going to hit yes. And that way I can check here as well. So we're going to look at the origin point here, and we can do the same thing, apply to all animations, but we know that they're in the middle for both, and we're actually going to leave them in the middle. One of the things that you might do in a different game is you might put the origin point for the player to the bottom so it flips from the bottom, but we're going to leave this in the middle since all we're doing is jumping and walking and holding still. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename the default animation to idle, And we're actually going to change the speed of the animation, which is over here in the corner. So when you actually select an animation over here, you actually have some other properties that you can add. The first property we want to change is we want it to loop. And now this is a cool thing. You can just double click on this rather than trying to find the bar, which is kind of hidden there. You can just double click and it'll change for anything that's yes or no or true or false. For the speed, I think I'm going to put this to 10, but we might mess around with that if it's too fast or too slow. We'll have to mess around and see how that looks, but I think 10 frames should be good. So there we go. We have our idle animation, and let's actually just leave it as idle for right this second. And let's actually put this right there. Now, the thing we need to do is we need to call this our object player. Let's call this object player. And the thing we really need is our behavior. So we're going to spend more time with all of the behaviors. I'm going to add all the behaviors in the next lecture, but I just want to get you up and running because this is how easy it is to make a platform game with Construct 2. So I went to our behaviors, and if you don't know already, hopefully you do by this point in the recording, how to make Construct 2 is just driven by behaviors. It's behavior-driven programming. So how to make a platform very easily, you add your level object with a solid behavior, you grab your player, and then you just add the platform behavior to it, and you're done. Literally, that's it. So that's what's really, I mean, the speed in that is just unparalleled to the other software out there. I mean, I can't say enough nice things about it because it's just that fast. And I've used all of the software, and I love using all the other software because I like to design games. But really, this is just such a fast way. So now you can already see that there's some issues with it, but we're going to fix that in a bit. We're going to fix this, all the speed and stuff, but at least you have this here. And the one other thing I will add to it right now, just so I can make my point, is we're going to go to our behaviors, and we're going to add the scroll to behavior to it. Now, usually, I can just type this in if I can't find it. Usually what I do is I have a camera object and I have it follow the player, but for this, since it's classic style, all I need to do is have it center on the player, so I don't really need a camera object at all. Since we have unbounded scrolling, like I explained before, it's going to go past the edges, so I'm going to hit play, and this is actually going to go past it when I use the arrow keys. There we go. So I should collide here, but it's going to go past, and now you can see that it's a black border because it's like the abyss, you know, there's nothing there. But now we can actually walk around because of the scroll to behavior. We can actually walk around the level, and we can see how this is already taking shape for the most part, right? We see the entire level. Our collisions are completely off, but that's okay. But now we can actually explore and go around, and you know, just in 10 minutes we have this done. So this jumps too high, which is really cool because now this actually influences our gameplay, because you're probably like, oh man, now I gotta go back, I gotta hop on this platform, which would be there, and I have to go get that power up, and you already went through and endured some spikes, and maybe you're only on one life left. So all of this is part of the level design that we'll continue to talk about as we continue to make this. So now that we have our player, let's think about what we have to do next. What else would we like to add? Let's start to add in, but we're not going to do the behaviors as much. Let's start to add in the other sprites. So one of the things that I don't think I actually have in the assets folder this moment is the platform, so we'll save that for the next lecture. But we can start to add in all of our other stuff, and we'll move them onto their own layer at a separate point in time. But just so we can catch up here, let's go to our assets folder, and we'll add in the other animations when we actually make the player move and fix the collision in the next lecture. Let's go to our level, and let's add in our power up icon, and let's call this object power up. It's really just like a feather orb, which is what I called it in the sign stuff, but originally it was going to be a rocket boot, but I'm very happy with the feather orb, so we're going to call it that. But if I do call it a rocket boot throughout time, that's the reason why. Let's add in our coin object as well, and let's call this our object coin. And all of these are supposed to be sprites, so we're doing this manually. You might be able to drag it all in at once from the assets folder, but I'd rather do it this way. So we're going to just make another sprite on our entities layer here. We're going to open up the folder. Let's add in our spike, and we're going to just add all of these in, and we're going to name all of these so we have them for the next lecture when we actually give them behaviors, and we do all of the player programming and all of the environment programming. And all this will take shape a lot faster than I thought, so I'm actually excited about this. So if you're watching this and you feel like you know exactly what to do from here and you just want to import all of your sprites, then feel free to go do that. I'm going to call this object trail because that's the effect that it does. You can also make your own sprites. If you don't like this trail effect, I know it might not fit the style as much, then feel free to make your own effect whatever you want to do, really. I'm just here to help provide the logic. So object explosion. Actually, you know what? Object explosion is not a sprite. I messed that one up. I'm getting into the mode here where it's just automatic. That's going to be a particle effect. So let's go to our particles. You might notice that I do have plugins installed, but that's for my own benefit. That is not for this project. So if you see something that you don't have, it's probably a plugin. And you can probably get it for free, and you can just quickly Google exactly where to get it. This is our object explosion, which we will add later on when we do our boss. Let's see what else we have. Let's go to our sprites. Let's open up the folder. Let's add our health full, because I like this. Object pickup. Object health pickup is cool. And let's go add our sprites. Let's see what else we have. Anything else from here? We got our spikes. We're going to do the boss door stuff in a bit. We could do that now, actually. Let's get our arrows. That's what I was missing. So our arrows are going to be in a family for a collision. So I'm warning you guys now, there's going to be some overlap with the free version, a lot of overlap with the free version, and that's going to be one of them. Using families is extremely helpful. And honestly, families are the reason why I upgraded when I was first starting. I was like, wow, I need that feature. Because when you have a family, you can group together your objects, and then you only have to write the code once. You can say, if the player collides with the arrow family, then I can have it do its intended effect rather than repeating over and over again. So I didn't call this anything. Let's call this object ceiling, object arrow ceiling arrow. Let's double click. Let's add another sprites, and let's see what else. Actually, let's close out of this, and for our actual for our boss doors, let me hold down shift and hit open. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm actually going to look at the height here. So 220 is the height. And you know what? I actually shouldn't have deleted that. I'm going to make a new frame here. I'm going to make this 440. And by doing so, I can now copy this, and I can paste it, and I can put it as close to the bottom as I can get it. And I can even move it down with the arrow keys if I get too close there. It's like right there. And I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to paste this here. And I can already tell that I went too high, so we're just going to kind of overlap this. Let's see where my selection is. Something like that should be relatively good. We can always change this to the object that I already have, that I already made. But for right now, we can just kind of leave this like, where do you think this looks good? Right there's fine. And then what I can do here is I can delete these two, and I can just hit crop. And that cropping button is so useful, and I wish other programs had it, but this is just an amazing, I use this all the time, and it's such a time saver. So we're going to exit out of that. It's a very large image, so we're going to have to scale it down a little bit, I believe, but we're going to call this object door. Actually, let's call this object boss door. And let's put that over here. And let's keep going. By doing all these assets first, I hope that, I mean, this is very repetitive, and you're probably like, man, this is boring. But this is actually a better way to do it than to add it as we go and confuse you. So I think we actually have everything from here that we need. Let's go to our anti-floof, and let's actually import that from frames, from files. So let's go over here. Anti-floof is our enemy, and let's just grab our walk because we actually don't need our idle for this. And our walk should be good, just like that. Cool. So let's actually rename this animation to our walk. Let's call this WALK. There's a bunch of ways to do animators, but and what I mean by animators is there's a bunch of ways to actually have Construct 2 animate your thing, but for this, we're just going to do this very basic, and we're just going to call the animations when we need them to be here. Let's actually put the walk speed to 10, and let's loop it as well. So we can double click on that. And let's double check our collision here, and we're going to go over that when we get to our enemy AI, but I just wanted to have it there. Let's call this our object enemy. And let's see what else we are missing now. Let's go to our sprites, and let's open up our next sprite here. What else are we missing? We have our HUD stuff. Okay, so we have all the HUD stuff to do. Let's see what else we need. Our menu stuff we're going to save. our sign. Let's actually put in our sign. So there you go. There's an example of the collision not being a bounding box. So the first thing that I want to do with this sign here is it looks like I can crop it a little bit. So let's crop it. Then I want to grab our collision and I want to set this to a bounding box. Generally, you always want your game to have box collision because that's just always going to be the easiest way to detect something. If you have to do little corner stuff that we're going to end up doing for our tiles, that's perfectly fine as long as they match up. But really, we're just going to always be using box collision for everything. So let's exit out of this. Let's call this one object obj sign and hit OK. And we'll program that in a bit as well. And let's go and do our HUD stuff, and then we should be good to go. So for our HUD, let's actually import frames from files. Let's go to our HUD, and let's actually grab our health bar. Let's actually go from 6 to 0. That went from 0 to 6, didn't it? There we go. So we have to click 0 to 6 like that. And oh, you know what? It would have worked the other way, but that's okay. I can always delete all these by hitting delete, and then I can just import again. That's not a problem. So let's just try and see if that goes backwards. Did I do it again? I did. It's okay. I can always move that around, but basically we just want it to have like so. You can see that I'm just dragging these until we get to 0. So now if we zoom in here, we should be at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 0. And this is a very simple way of doing the HUD health element, and I actually really like doing it this way because otherwise it's going to get a little confusing. So object HUD, I called it element. I meant to call it object HUD health. Let's double click and let's add a new sprites. Let's actually look at our HUD, see what else we need to do. Okay, so our boss health and our boss health red, these are two separate objects. So let's actually import our boss health. And let's set that to a bounding box because it didn't get fully set to bounding box. And let's put that up here for right now. And then let's go grab our boss health red. Now our red is going to be, let's also make sure that this is a bounding box. The origin point for this, and let's see if I can crop that a little bit. Our origin point is going to be from the left side because this is what's actually going to drain. We're going to have the frame act as like a glass casing, and then this is going to be the one that actually drains. So I'm going to put the origin to the left, and I'm done with that. So I can name these object boss health, and I can name this object boss casing, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I'm trying to think if we have anything else to import here. Now that we can import our button, but the text box, oh yeah, you know what, we'll get the text box here. Crop that a little bit. That should be good for this. We can just call this object button X, and if you wanted to import A, you could do that as well. Let's double click and add our sprite for our text box, and I think we should be good to go after that. I don't know if there's much more. We can exit out of this. We can call this object text box, or object, I think I call it convo box, because this is kind of where you get to interact with it. All of these are going to be split up again into separate layers when we get to it. Let's hit save, and let's just double click and see if there's anything else that I'm forgetting that we would like to import now versus later. So we got our tile maps done, got our background and our tile map with the solid object. We have our sign imported. We're not going to import anything from the purchased folder just yet. Our menu stuff we're going to do later as well. Same thing goes for our boss stuff. We're probably going to hold off on that even though we've imported most of it. But we could do one final thing here is we can actually, let's finish off our player, and then we're actually going to duplicate our enemy. So what we're going to do for our enemy is we're going to right click and clone the object type. So now it has the same properties, the same image, but it's a completely different object. So I'm going to actually call this object boss. And now I'm going to change the size from 18 by 18 to 96 by 96. So now we have our boss, which is really nice because we didn't have to make another sprite for it. For this, what did I want to do? I wanted to do this was just an empty sprite, so I can delete that, and I can actually delete that from the project as well. For our player, let's just finish up with our player animations here. Let's double click and let's add a new animation in the animations window. Let's call this walk. And you can use whatever conventions you want. If you want to give it an ID prefix, which is something I usually do, feel free to do that. If you want to, not name it in all caps, feel free to do that. It's really up to you. I just want to get the basic concept done. So let's go to Floof and let's add in our walk. our 4-frame walk there, and let's delete frame 0. And we'll actually come back and we'll actually add in the actual origins and collision. So let's do our wall slide. And this is a frame actually, so it's a lot easier. Import frame wall slide. And I love what we did here. I can delete this. We have it as the opposite direction, which is really nice because you'll see that when you wall slide, you're not wall sliding it in your face, you're wall sliding and looking the other way, which is a really cool thing to have. Let's add another animation for our, what was the other one? Our jump. Starting to lose track of what the other one was. Let's import the frames to our jump, or frame. And let's import the fall frame as well. Let's go here, let's open this up, and let's go to our fall frame. Cool. So let's go to our idle, and let's grab our collision. And even if they're all the same, let's set all, apply to all animations to bounding box. So now when I look at all of these and I look at all the frames, they're all at the same, which is what you want to have. Otherwise, it'll mess up really badly. So make sure you do that. And what I mean by really badly is your sprite will just go like this. It'll look like a sine wave. It'll just start to freak out especially if your origin point is in different locations. So let's apply this from the idle frame to all animations, and there we go. I apologize again for that sound. It's pretty annoying. But okay, so now we're pretty much done. I think we are all set up. We have all of our things here. If you wanted to go even further, you could even make them their own folders here. You can give them all of their names. For our text object, we're going to get into that in a second for our sign. So we're probably going to have another one of those, but we can call this for right now our object dest text. That's going to be our destination text. And then we're going to have our source text as well that we read from for our, let's actually, yeah, you know what? I'm contemplating if I want to import more for the XML stuff. You know what? We might as well do that since we're here. Let's go to our files folder here. And this is just a place for any other extra files. And let's actually import this from our Floofs Adventure or our assets folder. Where did my assets folder go? Let's import this from our sign, and this is good because I guess I'm just going to get all these things imported right now. So let's import all of these XML files. We're going to go over these in the next lecture or in the sign lecture if I do that separately or not, but at least we'll have them imported and ready to go. So now our project is really looking good, and this is what the data is going to read off of when we actually hover over a sign, when our player actually collides with the sign. Okay, so that was a whole lot of importing, but thank you for sticking with me. Hopefully you kind of skipped through it and understood that once we got to our third import, you kind of knew what to do from there. I probably should have said a disclaimer, you should import all the assets right now, but now that we're done with that, we can actually move on and get to our game programming. So I'm really excited to go do that. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.